It is so, so challenging for women in particular who are founding companies to raise capital.
Totally. And I have so much empathy for women raising capital. It is so hard. I mean, it shouldn't be this hard.
Innovation continues to happen at Maven. So, what are you thinking about?
If you work at Maven, you know, one of the things I always say is as we make decisions, the value system that we have is first for the patient, then the client, then Maven, then your team, then yourself.
This is Inspiring Women. I'm Lori McGraw, and today I'm speaking with Kate Ryder, and she is the founder and CEO of Maven Clinic. Maven Clinic is the world's largest virtual care clinic for women's and family health. Now, Kate is in the rare air of being a female-led, female-founded unicorn status company. It's been 12 years in the making. I am confident Kate is only at the beginning of what she is accomplishing with Maven. Kate, thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
All right. Well, Kate, let's get started. You are well known in this industry, and it is true. You are in rare air in terms of, building an incredible company across thousands of employers, hundreds of countries that use the services of Maven. When you started and founded Maven 12 years ago, it was a new category. It was an area where there were not many companies like Maven at all. And you're a female founder, and there are very few of those. There still are not enough of those. So let's go back to the origin story of Maven 12 years ago. Why did you start it? Why did you do it? What compelled you?
Sure. 12 years ago. Well, it's kind of crazy. It feels sometimes like it's gone by in an instant, and then sometimes it really feels the 12 years. So I was working in London in venture capital, and a bunch of my friends were starting to have kids. In fact, my first really close friend had a baby, got pretty bad postpartum depression. I was on texts and calls, and I would, see her and visit her. And that was kind of my first eyes wide open experience with that transition to motherhood. Because in our 20s, so many women are carefree, they're working, they have all these dreams. And then the second that you think about that family building journey or you get on it, women carry so much of the weight of that, and there's no linear journey. It's not easy. And it was the decade that I knew I was going to have kids. I have 3 kids today. In fact, today is my daughter's 8th birthday, and she was asking
Yay.
me. She was she was like, "You started Maven before I was even born." I was like, "Yes, my girl." And so it was just this natural moment to say, okay, there's a lot that we can fix here for women. And in this moment, when there's all of this virtual care and digital health and innovation, finally, what's been typically an industry without innovation, starting with women and innovating for women felt like just a total no brainer and something I was really excited to do.
Well, in the sort of like rear view mirror, it might seem like a no-brainer, but I have to imagine at the time it was an enormous step into a zone of discomfort and unusual. And you didn't come from a background of having founded companies before or surrounding yourself with other female founders because they didn't exist at the level that you brought Maven at all. So that compelling moment where you said, yeah, I'm doing this, like this is what is happening. What did that look like? What made you take that actual first leap?
Well, I think I have a bit of a history of doing crazy things like that. So I did move to Spain when I was 22, not knowing the language, and just kind of moved in with a bunch of Spanish speakers and decided that I needed to learn the language. And to be honest, that's still one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. My dad's an entrepreneur. It didn't feel as crazy. I get asked this question sometimes, like how did you go from journalism to starting a company? Most people have MBAs or have been in on founding teams of companies, But I just grew up around entrepreneurship. I watched my dad do it. I watched my aunt do it. My mom would help actually both my aunt, her sister, and my dad. So it felt very natural to me. And then I think what I got really excited about, which goes back to what excited me as a journalist, was that there were just these stories that were so untold about how women experience healthcare. And instead of writing about them, I then got this job in venture capital. I watched entrepreneurs build products to tackle specific problems. And I was like, well, I want to build a product to solve this problem. And so it was so much fun to report out the story, not just, through my own experiences or my friends' experiences, but more broadly, going to the providers themselves and talking to the providers about how they experience women's health and fertility and pregnancy journeys and where the gaps are. So I just spent tons of time with patients and providers in the beginning of Maven. Less so with business people actually, but just the patients and the providers. And so that was really the inspiration to reimagine women's health through the lens of a virtual clinic and think about how much more access you could provide if you brought all of these different providers into a, kind of so-called clinic in your pocket. And so that was kind of where it all started.
So learning about it, knowing that the idea was different, and then really understanding the we'll just say product market fit by speaking to the women who you are serving, as well as the new solution that you're delivering. So that is working. That's gelling. One of the hardest things for women founders is getting the capital that they need to fuel their idea. You have been extraordinarily successful at doing that. And so, can you just talk about, first of all, like when did that start working? It probably looks easy now. It is never easy to raise capital in good markets, in bad markets, it doesn't matter. You've been excellent at it. So, were you good at it in the beginning? How are you good at it now? What started working for you? Because you know that it is so, so challenging for women in particular who are founding companies to raise capital.
Yeah, no, totally. And I have so much empathy for women raising capital. It is so hard. I mean, it shouldn't be this hard. So it's a failure of a system that it's this hard. Um, For me, I was lucky on the friends and family because I had worked in venture. So we raised a little over $1 million, which at the time was a certain amount. It was 2014 or something, and that was just friends and family. And then we ended up after we had built prototype with that, and hired a small team. It was raised on a note that we just left open, a convertible note, and then we raised another million to then go launch the product. So we raised about a $2 million seed, and that was just meetings. And I at that point, it was helpful to had worked in venture capital for 2 years because I knew the funds, I knew where to meet angel investors, I knew some of them myself. And so much of raising money in the early days, when it's a combination of angel investors and seed funds, is just like getting that door open for you constantly. And that person who likes your idea but maybe doesn't want to invest at this point, they're still going to introduce you to their buddy because investors, they love, like, they have networks, and that's kind of part of the game, both on the entrepreneur side and the investor side. So that was helpful. Where it got much harder was when we got to our first institutional round, which was our Series A. And there wasn't really women in venture capital, like women's health was still considered niche. And that was the worst fundraise. And I actually did find a woman eventually. She was an amazing woman, Lauren Brugan, who invested and led the Series A. She's still in VC now. She works at Heritage, but she was somebody who just was pregnant with her third child, knew the problem we were trying to solve, and convinced her partnership. This is a bet to take. This is a hugely female dominated industry. And so I think it's my advice to founders in a tough fundraise is know the value of your time, know get in the market quickly to know the type of investor who would invest in you. And so for me, very quickly I knew that male tech investors would not invest in Maven. Um, they just like they didn't know healthcare, they didn't know women's health, they didn't know the problems we were solving as intimately, obviously, as a female would. And so I was only really talking to either women investors or healthcare investors. And so that was really important to kind of narrow things down. And so the first, it's like this. Actually tons of investors out there. So like, who are the ones that you actually want to talk to? Who will you don't have to do so much education because education will kill a deal if they're not inherently excited about the category in the first place. Um, and then the second thing is just if you truly believe and you have the signals that it's the right business, the right product, the right time, and you're the right founder, just keep going.
Yep.
Um, if you don't, if the signals aren't there, and I know it's really tough right now. I work with founders. A lot of investors are really just focused on AI companies, and if you
Yep.
don't have an AI company, it's really tough. Even some of my friends who have these great AI companies, they're like, "Yeah, but if we're not, all the so half the VCs I'm talking to right now just want to put money in OpenAI or Anthropic. They don't even want to write like any track into anything else. So it is really hard, but if you really have that strong conviction, just keep going.
Yep. And so, Kate, just because you do so much work with, other founders and you're very generous in terms of, mentoring and advising to others, so that issue that you're talking about in terms of like just, stick with it and product market fit and really being passionate about it, it's still hard. And so for women that you've worked with, are there examples that you have of where, like, somebody really did something different that allowed them to be successful? Because with the founders that I work with, the entrepreneurs who are women who have this hard problem, these are the types of things that we talk about, but it's like there's fewer of them that make a switch, that sort of do something different to turn it on. So I'm just curious if you've been able to sort of like get to that little small something that takes a really strong idea and allows them to find the right investor, to look beyond the whatever it is, shiny object of AI, which is super powerful and all those great things.
Yeah, I think it's knowing like what you need to show and prove, and how long it will take to prove it. And just really knowing your market and having that confidence. And so I'll give you an example. One female entrepreneur I love, Kara Egan from Teal. Teal's like, I actually knew her when she was in venture capital. I pitched her way back in the day. And then the problem that she's solving, which is so critical, which is better cervical cancer screenings with, easier devices that are covered and you can use it at home. And um it took her years to get, all of the regulatory approvals for that, and she just, like, knew that once she would get the regulatory approval, she could get it covered, she could get it in the hands of lots of people, and so she just kept going, really focused on, the one thing, and investors who really deeply cared about the problem and understood the opportunity were like, "Okay," like, she set the expectations well and she just kept going and then she did it. And so, I think then all of a sudden you have something that is very unique to you that you've put in the work and it becomes it's a competitive moat. And so I think that's, with Maven, it was always in the early days, like, we needed that first anchor client, not
Yeah.
like the first tiny contract, but like the first Fortune 50 anchor client, and we had a few years to go find that anchor client. And so if we didn't get that anchor client, would not have been successful, and thankfully we did, but it's kind of like because then, the anchor client is a reference for other clients, and it starts
100%.
flywheel. So like that was our moment. We needed to get the anchor client to get going. And I think just you have to know what that is.
Yep. Well, that is really strong. That's very strong advice. Let's fast forward a dozen years. So you've brought us from the early days and some great lessons learned that you share with others now. That's really impressive. 12 years in, you are developing new things. You just launched a direct to consumer platform nationwide. You
Yep.
talk about it
It's
as
it's
going
live in
back.
May. 5 in May, it's in May coming up.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. So tell us
Excited
about
to
it,
wing
because you
it.
talk about it as going back to your roots, and so, innovation continues to happen at Maven. So what are you thinking about?
Yeah, sure. I think we always are just following the patient. And that the patient's always our North Star. So if you work at Maven, you know, one of the things I always say is, you know, as we make decisions, the value system that we have is first for the patient, then the client, then Maven, then your team, then yourself. And so in that order. And so therefore, if you look at consumer health and you look at what patients are looking for and asking for, in a world where AI is becoming a front door and there's more of a democratized access um, to care and drugs like GLP-1s, which are completely game changing. I think they were stuck as people were just thinking about them as a weight loss drug for so long, but when you actually get into it, I was actually just talking to one of our members this morning. You know, it's like she started taking a GLP-1 and her joint pain went away that she'd had for 6 years. Now,
Mhm.
we don't know why, there's still a lot of research that needs to come out, but there's incredible applications of this drug that now, you know, consumers have that access to. I think in menopause and perimenopause care, where you have a lot of obese who haven't been trained, it's like virtual care is kind of your first step now. Like for certainly my friends, myself, because you know it's harder to get it in person from your doctor. Fertility, same thing. There's just a lot of research that hasn't been done. And so if your first or second cycle isn't successful, you know, you are left to your own devices. And so we're in this era now where there's this empowerment of the consumer that when we launched 10 years ago, we thought was starting because technology was there, but actually the user behavior hadn't changed yet. And so when we started, it was, wow, you have all this access, but people were still going in person to their doctor. And then COVID hit, and overnight, everyone kind of understood the promise of digital health. And now, whether it's wearables or diagnostics or whatever it is that you're doing, now you have all this choice. And so we're excited to now bring Maven back into that market where we have about 10 years of you know, clinical rigor and really innovating from inside the system with our clients, with employers, with health plans. But now, you know, like I was with one of our clients yesterday, and we were talking about the consumer product, and he's really happy because he's like, you know, Maven is doing, you know, saving me money and driving outcomes and doing a lot for my specialty care across my women's health, but I'm never going to cover GLP-1s, you know, for in certain categories. And so it's good that like you are doing that, and they can still have that continuity of care as they are you know, in specialty programs on the B2B side. But then if they want to layer on, you know, a GLP-1, or there's, you know, members of this employer's population that are having menstrual health needs and they don't actually qualify for one of our specialty journeys today, they can still have access to great healthcare. And so I think it's the expansion of access, and it's really just following the member, and what, you know, she wants.
In terms of the past 10 years or so, there certainly has been, Maven was an early category creator in terms of new options for women's health. But over the years, like you said, there's a proliferation of new solutions. They might be wearables, they might be direct to consumer, they might be, options that are provided by an employer. How are you thinking about what all of those various options for women, but they can be fragmented at times. So how are you thinking about that in terms of what needs to be brought together? Is it okay to have this fragmentation? How are you thinking about that from both an innovation standpoint as well as what you're doing with Maven?
Sure. I think, you know, fragmentation is one of the biggest things we're addressing by bringing our consumer product to market. I think, you know, specifically for just take a patient of ours, and she's 40 and she has two kids at home, and she's headed into perimenopause and wants her third kid. that patient is in multiple pathways, right?
Yep.
Pediatrics, perimenopause, fertility, soon to be pregnancy, hopefully. Um, and so that we don't want that patient's care fragmented in the way that it is today. So in the enterprise platform, it's not like she can be in all of these different tracks at once at Maven, but there's still things that she might need that may not be covered by an employer. And they may never cover it because that's just, it's more on the lifestyle side or the wellness side. And so that's really where we're excited to kind of bring all of that together. And so an example of how it can come together is we have a great partnership with Aura. We're the only I think we have a announcement coming out, like, but we're one of the only companies that is truly integrated with them, where our providers are actually looking at Aura data as, they're taking care of our patients. We ingest a bunch of data in from health information exchanges, ADT feeds, wearables, diagnostics, and so we're able to have that complete picture of the patient, and then we're able to offer, not only our own kind of digitally guided care, but we're also able to offer all of these different providers on the Maven network. And so I think the future looks like, ideally you don't never have one platform. Like you'll always have a few platforms. So I
Right.
don't think there's some monopolistic one front door to healthcare. Like, no, that would be bad probably for innovation. But if we are working with somebody throughout her reproductive journey and she's using other products that we can easily plug in, like Aura, if she has if she's used Superpower and we're plugging in some of that data, then Maven really can act as that front door because we have the providers in the background who can guide the member for every step. And then particularly for our enterprise members, but also it will be eventually for our consumer members, we'll have their insurance information so we can actually connect the experience that she's having on Maven and across some of these other platforms, put the data all together in one place. But then if she needs to go to in-person care, we can kind of guide her to who's in network, what's covered. We can be transparent about what things cost. And so it just becomes that much more seamless and that much easier.
And that's also very complex, and that's a big impact if you can bring that all together without any question whatsoever. So, Kate, I've only got two more questions for you, and I know we're tight on time, but you're a decade into this. You have created a new category. You have built an incredible company with Maven. What does the next decade look like? At first, you were solving a need and you just felt like there was a there, and you were going to do something about it. But now you've built something pretty big. Where are you going? What's the next decade?
Yeah, and listen, I think not to use buzzwords, but it's kind of like the next decade is actually just truly personalized. I mean, AI is going to transform everything from how we work internally together and how an organization exists to how members receive healthcare and how data flows between all these platforms and what like the best products, not just in 10 years, but in 1 year, they really know who you are. And so I'm so excited about that because even it's been so hard to get data flowing through this system. And, even like 3, 4 years ago, like it was just, we were in this age of data scarcity where it was so hard because you would just have to do like integration after integration after integration. And now it is just so much easier. And so we're really excited to really have more complete visibility over everything that is important to a patient, not only kind of like what their historical medical records say and what they're self-reporting and doing inside of our product, but also their real-time, data through their wearables, through some of the, the other consumer applications they're using, a lot of that you can stream in. And so that then means that you can be so much more proactive about what somebody needs and wants if you know what their goals are. And so applying that to reproductive health, if somebody's trying to get pregnant or somebody is pregnant or somebody's recovering, somebody's going through menopause, like they have a set of goals that they're after, whether it's as simple as like getting pregnant if in the fertility journey, or in menopause, and maybe it's, they're having like a specific symptom of brain fog. And like that's the one thing that is like impacting their life and they want to change. Well, if a smart system knows that about you and also knows all the other things going on and how your metabolic health is impacting your reproductive health, which is impacting your mental health, then you're moving into a more proactive system. And so we've just like, you can't have a proactive system if you just have a limited picture of somebody. And so I'm just so excited about that. And then just, yeah, uniquely bringing it to women's health, because there's like when you have more served categories, like there's less room, there's more people in it. Women's health, it's like so
It's so big, and there's so
more
much
space to
more
work.
to be done with it. Kate,
Right.
last question, really, this is just incredible, but, the best leaders, I find, constant learners, always pushing themselves to sort of be at the next level of peak leadership performance. What are you learning right now that's fueling
Oh my
you
God.
to be your best?
My God, everything is killing me right now. Every CEO right now has to be an AI expert. Nobody knows how things will work in the future. I was in a CEO chat yesterday, actually, and we were all talking about Jack Dorsey's article that he just published on what he expects out of Block in the future and the type of org that he's building. Or and it's very different than the org of today, very different than Andy Grove style management. And I would say, that it's just, how do you take AI and not only use it to, of course, everyone's looking at, well, same input, lower costs, same input, lower costs. But actually, it's like, and then faster decision making leads to more innovation, which leads to more growth, which leads to, better impact for members. And so, like, everyone's trying to figure that out right now. No one's figured it out. And so, maybe the occasional, like, two-person, team in a garage has figured it out. I see some of those stories every once in a while, but, so yeah, that is I've never been my learning curve is so steep right now, which is fun, I've been doing this now for 12 years, and some years are steeper than others, but I would say this is the steepest year to date.
Well, it's going to be an awesome year. That's my prediction for you, Kate. And this has been an incredible Inspiring Women conversation. I've been speaking with Kate Ryder. And Kate, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.